Improve it. Improve it.
Podcast.
Hello, my Improve It peeps. Welcome back to the show where we ditch the corporate blah and bring you real talk on leading with intention, empathy, and of course, a whole lot of fun. I'm your host, Erin, and today's episode is about something radical, something that might just change the way you think about leadership. Imagine if every single year you fired yourself from your job. I said fired yourself from your job. Sounds wild, right? But today's guest, Wendy Gonzalez, the powerhouse CEO of Sama, does just that. And she's here to tell us why you should too. Now, Wendy has built and scaled a company that not only powers some of the biggest names in AI, Google, Walmart, and more, but also lifts thousands out of poverty through meaningful work. And her leadership philosophy, it's all about reevaluating, evolving, and leading with radical empathy. And before we dive in, my Improve It peeps, big news is coming next week. And trust me, you don't want to miss it. Spoiler alert, we're changing our name. So if you're ready to rethink the way you show up as a leader, challenge the status quo, and maybe even fire yourself for the better, stick around. This one's going to make you see leadership in a whole new way. Let's improve it with Wendy Gonzalez. Okay, Wendy, welcome to the Improve It pod.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here, Erin.
Okay. So our theme for this month, the month of February, is radical empathy. And I always like to set an intention for you, for me, for our listeners at the top of the show. So what is a one-word intention that you want to give to guide this conversation today? What's one word that comes to mind for you?
Respect.
Ooh, okay. Why respect?
I think that we need to respect, and this is kind of where empathy comes from, is I'm a big believer that, who you are at work isn't what you just did today. It's the collection of experiences. It's it's who you might be. You could be a mom, you could be a sister, you could be whatever that is. We all hold a lot of different experiences that make us who we are, that make us the employees we are, the leaders that we are. And so when I say respect, it's respecting that. It's respecting everything and all the experiences that brings the individual to the table.
Oh my God.
If you can do that, now you're going to be in a better place for communication.
Yes. The whole person, just the human being, not the human doing. I love that. So, okay, when we talk about radical empathy, right? This theme of radical empathy, we're talking about it all month on the show. Is there any experience in your life that comes to mind when you hear the words radical empathy? And can you share that with us a little bit? Anything that comes to mind, you're like, that was just a time when somebody either expressed it or you expressed it to somebody else.
Yeah, I think I'll use an analogy and then maybe give a couple of examples of this. But I think that radical empathy is actually a really important concept. And the way that I put it is this. Okay, so say you're driving down the road and the person in front of you slams on the brakes, right? You have to slam on your brakes. And so the immediate reaction to that could be, holy cow, like you could road rage, right? And get all crazy and say, what is that person doing? They're a terrible driver. Like, this is awful. Or you could also come into this and say, like, what if that were my grandma or my mom? And maybe it's just they're slowing down because they see somebody who's going to cross the street. So this idea of empathy of where the person is coming from, maybe not assuming what either their background or intention is I think where a lot of people get into challenges. And so when I think about empathy, whether it's that situation or sitting in, I was actually in a meeting just the other day, and I didn't, this person, this individual had in fact, actually, this is a call I was just on not too long ago. They just had an organization, a discussion with their leader about organizational change. Like, hey, we're going to move you here and there, and offered them a very specific position. They were coming from this place of, well, I think you've expressed to me that you're really frustrated, so I'm just going to assume you don't even want to be here. They didn't take the time to understand not only what was that person concerned about, where were they at in their life, that if that just sort of taking a moment to understand where the person is coming from could have avoided like an entire miscommunication and assumptions that would have had fairly significant impacts on our organization. So it's that just taking that moment that I think is really critical to know, hey, where is the person coming from? As a leader, I'm always thinking, hey, it's not just about like when you're talking about individuals and leaders, you want to engage them and they need to have agency. How do you respect what the company needs as a company, right? What does the company need is always the thing that's on top of mind. What does the individual need? And if there's alignment, fantastic. But if you have no idea where that person is coming from, you have no idea where they are either in their life or their whole self, I think that's where a lot of challenges can occur.
Oh my God. Wendy, I love that. You know what's funny? When I was intently listening, I will tell you that, but it spurred some emotion in me because I think I can think about a time when I definitely assumed with somebody I was leading and the outcome of that conversation versus coming into that conversation and asking questions and being inquisitive and genuinely listening to understand, not just respond, which is like a huge tenet for us in improv comedy, right? We always want to listen to understand, not just respond. And I feel like what you just said in that situation as a whole just gives a really good light on what empathy really is. I think that non-assumption is key. I have been a witness, and I have been the person who has assumed versus taken the time to really give empathy and put myself in the other person's shoes. And it leads to different results. So I love that example. And I have, speaking of just examples, I have a question from one of our Improve It peeps that I want to play here for you. We'll dive into it. We'll listen to the question, and then I'm going to ask you some questions about the question so we can answer it for one of our peeps. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Erin, love the show and have been thinking a lot about this. How do you know when it's time to step back and reevaluate your role as a leader? Thank you, and looking forward to hearing the answer.
Okay. So I know we have a lot of people in their mid-careers who listen to this show. I know they have a lot of people who are senior leaders who listen to this show. And what I loved about you, Wendy, when I got your information was this idea of firing yourself. And you have this very unconventional leadership style, which I think is really awesome and refreshing and will be such a great twist for our peeps here today. I'm going to call your leadership style bold. That's what I'm going to call it. So can you talk about this idea of firing yourself every year? And hopefully we can answer this peep's question through some of your life's work. So how do you fire yourself every year, and where did that come from? Where did you get that philosophy?
It came from a lot of discussions with other CEOs. So this is now I've been in this role for a while now, but being a first time CEO, I was obviously really not only nervous about it, but I spoke to a lot of different people, coaches, people who had been 1, 2, 3 time CEOs, just to say, hey, what are the things I need to look out for? Like I've got to know, now I'm managing a board, I'm doing all these different things. And how do you ensure that you're not just the leader that you are today, but you're the leader that the company needs you to be, and the company needs you to be the next year and the next year, because I had this sort of responsibility of saying, hey, I need to be able to guide the ship, know where it's going, but you have to have enough humility to say, are these are the needs? Am I fulfilling them? Right. And really taking a look at that objectively. So here's where the business is. This is where we need to grow as an organization. So as an example, a few years ago, it was really about, hey, we don't, for example, have a PLG motion, a product-led growth motion, or these are the 3 or 4, name your business strategies that we need to focus on. Where I believe we need to go as a company, I took the time to say, okay, hey, what does a CEO do? What are the core focus areas are? If I heard you, just kind of like org design, right? If you don't build with the people's names in it, you say, what are we trying to achieve? Try to say, hey, this is what we're going to achieve. Fire myself and say, would I rehire myself? Are these the skills that are actually needed to accomplish this? If they are not the skills that are needed to accomplish this, have I surrounded myself with the right talent, people, tools, support to make it happen? Or do I have some serious either work to do myself, or should I think about this? And I think this is a really difficult thing to do, to say, hey, if I really truly believe I'm not the right person, then I need to own it, right? And say it. So that exercise, because it doesn't stay static. Businesses change. My business is AI. Like 2 weeks ago, before the DeepSeek news happened, did anybody think that there was going to be anything but huge NVIDIA chips and tons more power being used and all these things? And things change all the time. So that evaluation and evaluating yourself, not like it doesn't have to be every day. Take a lot of time if I was doing this every day, but looking at this annually, taking a reflect back, saying, hey, where's the business? Where does it really need to be? Am I able to do those things? Would I rehire myself from scratch, right? I think those are really important practices. It really resonates with objectively taking a look at where you need to grow and where you might need support.
Okay, I got to dive into this a little deeper, because my whole team was like, this is awesome. Like, how does she? So when you fire yourself, you are then hiring someone to do the function of that role that you're not doing. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay. And you're stepping into another seat where your skills can be better utilized. Is that right?
Well, I try to look at it as if literally, this is what the company needs in this role today. What would be the skills and the ideal candidate and profile that would need to be here to fit those needs? What skills, competencies, acumen do they need? And then would I rehire myself or would I not rehire myself? If I would not rehire myself, why is that? What are the things? What are the gaps? And in some cases, it has led me to seek, support, right? So I, for example, made a transition to get a coach at one point in time to really help me kind of hone a handful of skills that I didn't think that I had. I knew that I needed a technical leader or a technical partner to really come more. So I tried to supplement that with not only finding a complement for a technical leader on my team, but doing research, going to conferences, right? And then also honestly asking myself the question, which is not the easiest, thing to do, to say, hey, if I just don't think I can get there, how would I either restructure, or what would I tell my board? What would I do to address that? Because I think that's ultimately the responsibility. Is we have responsibility to our companies, but we also have responsibility to our to ourselves to be the leaders that our company needs us to be. So it is a very sort of objective approach, but I know that it happens sometimes in people leadership as well, right? You're doing an org design, right? And people always tend to say, hey, this is what I think makes sense. And you start putting names in there. And you're like, well, no, wait a second. Actually, what are the objective functions? What am I really trying to achieve by making this organizational change? If I were to hire from scratch, because it happens all the time when people are like, oh, I'm trying to save this person, or this person's a retention risk. You have to ask yourself the question of, well, would you rehire that person?
Yeah.
Well, I kind of look at it as something similar, which is, what are those responsibilities? What do you really need? And it causes some, I think, very good self-reflection on what you need to grow in, and maybe acknowledging, even if you're not good at these things, well, then what do you do to supplement that?
Totally. And I think it goes to our peeps question too, of when do you know, how do you know when to take a step back? And for everything you just said, I think it takes a lot of self-awareness. It takes some humility, some vulnerability, And I also think when businesses start off small, because you are the founder of this business, right? You created this business. So am I right in saying that? Yes.
Actually, I was not the founder. So our founder, we were originally actually launched as a nonprofit. So our founder started a few different nonprofit businesses and actually brought me on board to basically turn it into a scaled, growing business.
So, and when you first came in that role, so pardon my fact checking there, but so when you first came in that role, I'm assuming that you were on many different places on that org chart. You were wearing many different hats and you had to scale and you had to give up the things that no longer were in your wheelhouse and you knew somebody else could come in and take control of. Mentally, what do you do when you let go of that function? Is there anything that you do? Like, do you write yourself a resignation letter? Do you have some type of like talk to yourself or pump up talk? What do you do to release and surrender that responsibility so you can move on to your area of genius?
I look at a couple of things. It's a great question. So I'm I'm really thinking about the honest answer to that. I think from one standpoint is it is a little scary, right? Because we all and it doesn't matter what level you are. I may be a CEO, but I have a boss. I have bosses. I have several bosses. They're the board and the investors, right? Like it never ends. There's always, some of that sort of pressure that you have. And one of the things that I've tried to embrace is that why they hire, me or why they hire you or why are you valuable to this business is not your knowledge that you brought in, right? It's not your all your legacy. I've been here and I've operated it. They're hiring you because you've got really good judgment. You're a great critical thinker, all these different things. So I try to let myself be vulnerable and not saying, hey, my only value is that, I have this client relationship or I just, know this thing really well and all this knowledge allows me to do what I'm doing. I'm the only person who can connect the dots. Let's never focus our value on just your historical knowledge. So that's one component. The second is that I tried to embrace this quite some time ago, this recognition that I am rarely the smartest person in the room, if ever. Like there's always the whole goal is to hire people that are really smarter than you. And this is, I recognize there are different styles of leadership. Some executives, their whole goal is hey, it's my way or the highway. I've got this vision and this is I'm going to ram it through. My natural style of leadership, which is a little unusual, has always been as a servant leader, which is a little unusual. And for me, it was a lot about finding that balance of there is tell, sell, and consult. And sometimes as a leader, you need to tell, you need to be definitive about your direction. Sometimes you're selling, sometimes you're consulting and collaborating. And at the end of the day, I think a leader of any sort who has to be the smartest person in the room is going to be the only one who sort of dictates those ideas. The reality is that these companies don't run themselves off of an idea. They run themselves off of a bunch of individuals who have agency and ownership of those ideas. And so from my standpoint, the recognizing that, hey, I'm not going to be the smartest person in the room. There's some things I'm pretty good at. There are some things that I'm not that good at. Why did this board, why am I hired? Well, it's really around judgment, about, making decisions about, it's not always going to be about perfectly seeing the tea leaves, but really being able to see them enough and react. And so if you can gain confidence and really, again, what does that role need? What are the attributes you need to display? Let go of I'm only valuable because, I have this client relationship or I have this knowledge or I have this. And then second, be comfortable with people that are brilliant, right? And do your best to kind of harness that value.
Oh my God, I love it. So first of all, I love servant leadership. Just that goes into how I said you have a bold leadership style that just makes me so happy to hear because I think we need more servant leaders in this world. I think it's a beautiful thing. I also think when you're talking about just building trust with people, being vulnerable, I think builds trust. And when I'm not the smartest person in this room and I don't want to be, when you surround yourself with brilliance, like you said, I think there's so much power in that. I think for a long time, just in my own personal career journey, I played small. I wanted to be the smartest person in that room because guess what that fed? My freaking ego, you know? And then that ego was like, oh, okay, I do know what I'm talking about. But I've actually had this revelation the other day, Wendy, and this is going to be like a little therapy session within the show. I realized that I've done a lot of work on myself internally as a leader, as a human being. And I want to be around people who have also evolved, who make it a point to learn something new, to find out answers if they don't know. And even if they're not the most genius textbook person, they are smart in terms of how they've opened their mind to different worldly things and genuinely care about making the world a better place. So I think like that vulnerability, that humility that you're speaking about of making sure you're not the smartest person in the room will serve everyone listening in spades. That's huge. Hey, Improve It peeps. We keep this show ad-free because let's be real, no one wants to hear another meal kit or fancy toothbrush commercial. But if you're loving what we're putting down about leadership and radical empathy, let me tell you how my team and I can help you bring this magic to your workplace. Now, first, my book, I See You, A Leader's Guide to Energizing Your Team Through Radical Empathy, is on shelves. And if you haven't snagged a copy yet, what are you doing? It's packed with exercises to help you lead with empathy and create a team culture where everyone feels seen, heard, and valued. You can get it on Amazon, your favorite bookstore, or head to it'serindeal.com to make it easy peasy. Now, if you really want to shake things up at your next offsite, conference, or annual meeting, let's talk about the keynote, the empathetic leader. Now, this is not your average sit there and nod session. It's improv infused, it's highly interactive, and it's designed to get your team moving, connecting, and leading from a place of abundance instead of scarcity. Think movement, laughter, and big leadership takeaways. So if you're ready to bring some radical empathy and play into your workplace, let's make it happen. Head to it'serindeal.com to quote the keynote, grab the book, or just slide into my inbox. I would love to chat. Now back to the show. What you're really talking about here, and what I think our peep was asking too, is how do I know when it's not my turn to step forward and when I need to take a side step, not a back step, just a side step and let somebody else come forward. And I think the humility that you're giving me right now is huge. I want to talk about that and just stay on that. So I love this idea of firing yourself. It's just such a fun term. Is there ever been a moment where firing yourself led to this major breakthrough for you personally, or it could be for you and your team? Is there ever a moment that comes to mind?
So many. so many. So many moments that come to mind. I'll share one of those. But we were a company that was, we have a very interesting history. We transitioned from nonprofit to for-profit. We're a public benefit corporation, so we have our social mission, all these kinds of good things. Raising venture funding, Series A, Series B, when basically like 2% of women actually get funding, and being a part of a company. The founder was female. So when we first raised, it was kind of like, who else is coming to the meeting? Yeah. Look at you guys. Like, there's got to be somebody else here. All the way through obviously leading these rounds as CEO. There were many times in which I went through this process, and probably one that was in particularly challenging is that, let's face it, and I'm not saying this in a negative way. It's just the world and finance and investment. There are investors. They have certain backgrounds. There are not that many operators, meaning executives and leaders who are in these roles. And I don't look, or in some cases communicate. Like, I'm not going to come into the room and pound my fist, right? I'm going to communicate. One of the things that happened as I was going through this hiring and firing myself exercise was, do I have the demeanor and like the boy, I guess I don't know, or it's probably not the right way to put it, but am I coming into this room, into these rooms? Am I being commanding enough? I don't feel like I'm the type of person to have to shout and like talk all over you and run you over to get my point across. Should I be fired? Am I going to be successful? And now a new board with 7 different investors, people of different stages who have different agendas. Am I really going to be in a person who can kind of get this under control? Basically, because they will run my life. And I found for a period of time that I was being very like transparent here, was that I was kind of on the other end of that. And when I went through that exercise, I said to myself, for the good of this company, our mission, all these other things, I have to take a serious look. Am I going to be able to take this to the next level? Am I going to be able to wrangle these folks to get to a common objective, especially when I'm not going to just plow people over? And the breakthrough when I was like, okay, I'm really teetering here, what is the right thing to do? Because this company is, it's way bigger than me. It's our employees, it's the thousands of people in East Africa that we support. Like there's so much more to this that the responsibility I felt was, should I fire? And would I really rehire myself? And the long story short, or very, very long story as I'm sharing it, was that I dug in deep and I said, these may be my natural tendencies. But what this company needs is somebody to come in and take control. Take control, not be an ass about it, if I can't think of a better word to say, but to set a super clear, definitive direction, wrangle everybody in line. And whether that was my style, it didn't really matter. It's what the company needed. So that breakthrough of, okay, I've got to get this under control. I've got to do some things that are maybe not quite as natural. I've got to run very, very headfirst into not just conflict. That's always been fine and change, but about, sometimes if you need to talk over somebody, you have to. Like you had to get your point across. So that breakthrough was that sometimes you need to take real stock of what's needed at the time, whether it's your natural preference or not. And many things are worth stretching for. And that was the big breakthrough. Now, I wouldn't say I'm perfect at it, but it was a huge shift in mindset.
Have you continued that style as you have? Because it's almost like you had to create sort of a persona. We always do this in our improv training. We create some type of character or persona when we're doing presentations that just helps us keep our mindset in a specific place, right? So has that served you as you've continued on? Are you still embracing that quality?
Well, I did for a while, where it was really about, okay, I need to really change the way these folks see me and really assert myself in a different way. And it's really more transitioned into, okay, it's less about that, and the sort of style of communication is way more about controlling the narrative.
Yeah.
Super tight with your data. You can merge the two, but up front, I was like, holy cow, I never thought I would like be doing some of these things. And I did. And then it was like, okay, well, we've got that part under control. Really, what am I trying to accomplish? This is not somebody telling me what to do and me reacting. It's really got to be about controlling the narrative. And I can do so in a way that is in my style, in my communication. So I would say that there's always room for improvement, but yeah, it's evolved.
That's awesome. Because I think a lot of people listening, they're a little uncomfortable, or they struggle with getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. They cling to the roles, they cling to the things that they're their strengths. So what would you say to someone listening who might fear that reevaluating themselves could mean losing their influence? What would you say about that?
Oh, I would say it does. It feels like jumping off a cliff, right?
Yeah.
You may or may not have that parachute, but what you find is so incredibly freeing. It really helps distill both, what isn't, not only I think it led me to say what is important to me in this job. Like, because just as much as you say, am I qualified to be here? Wow, well, making this transition, somehow put me at a disadvantage. The flip way is exactly this. You are unblocking all the things that you could be and the potential by not thinking through your existing framework. The second is, I think that it brings a lot of clarity as to what is most important to you. Because at the end of the day, like if you think about firing and rehiring, even when you're applying for a job, right? So use this scenario. It's not just, wow, like I've got the right experience. I think I've got the right competencies. You're saying, do I want to be in this environment? Do I like my boss, my new manager? Am I super excited about where this thing is going? And so sometimes when you reframe that, even when you're thinking about your roles within companies, it gives you a chance to say what is most important to you as well. Like it creates more clarity.
Oh, I love that. Okay. So I'm just like, this is a conversation. We have done like upwards of 300 shows. And I have to tell you, we've never talked about this concept of hiring and refiring yourself in these terms. So I'm loving this conversation. And I think people coming into the show, they've seen the title and they probably have some misconceptions about stepping back in order to move forward. What would you say you hear some of the biggest misconceptions are? Like you just mentioned, it's like jumping off a cliff, right? But like that is the truth. What are some things that people might have as a misconception of taking this step back to move forward?
It could either open your eyes up to some things you may want to avoid, I guess. So like, I've always been really good at this, but the company needs have changed.
Yeah.
Like, I'm so good at doing this thing. And it's like, and I think this happens a lot, and it's something that we're going to have to embrace with all the technology changes that are happening too, is that change is inevitable. It can, forcing yourself to sort of introspect and take a step back may make you recognize that you're either not as competent as you thought you were. You might be missing some skill sets. You may be greater and better. It's just that fear of unknown that I think is key. But I also think that the thing that it unlocks is, you said something earlier, Erin, that I think is really important, which is this sort of, you like to be around people who are naturally curious, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who want to continue, like who want to stay stagnant.
Yeah.
And just never do better and never improve.
Yeah.
Or do you want to work with people? If the whole idea is like, it doesn't always have to be about moving up. It can be about moving laterally, but it forces a real introspection to what are you naturally curious about. And if you can get there, I can tell you as a leader and somebody who's done so many interviews and hired, a lot of people in my career, that natural curiosity, that introspection, that recognition of what you're good at and maybe what you're not so good at, but also knowing how you work around that and work with others is the key. That natural curiosity is the stuff of what makes grit, and grit is what the best employees are made of. Like without that.
Yeah. And I find that like on a personal and a professional level, honestly. Like I feel like the people I want to be around, and this is just Wendy, my own therapy right here. Okay. Just kind of lamenting to what you say, but I do feel like the people who I want around my energy, and you said aura before, in my presence, around my aura, are those people that, you know what, we all have shitty days. We all have bad days, right? Like we're not going to have the highest vibe all day long, but they choose to be curious on how to change it. And they want to continue to evolve versus numb, or versus stay stagnant, or versus just stay exactly where they are. And I think that that's a really cool thing that you're doing, is you're being introspective by hiring and refiring yourself. You are taking a greater look at what you're good at. And I think the misconceptions that evolve around that are just from fear, right? Like,
yeah, it's just fear. Maybe I'll look inside and find something I don't like, or recognize that maybe I have evolved and this isn't so interesting anymore, right? Change is incredibly difficult. But gosh, I can tell you, like, who do you want to be around at a workplace? Do you want to be with people who are phoning it in? No way. Like, life is way, way, way too short for that. Just kind of, I feel like, life is too short to be working with jerks. Like, you've got to find alignment. And I know that I want to find alignment with people who are passionate, intelligent, introspective, empathetic, brilliant, right? But super passionate. And if you can't find that sort of passion and what, how you get to that level of energy, boy, you're not going to be the best employee. You're not going to be the best employee for the company. You're not going to be the best colleague, and you're definitely not going to be the best leader. Right? It requires that all those things drive agency in leadership, or agency in whatever role you're playing. And so, I think it's really, really important. And at the end of the day, just as a manager, one of the things I think is it's like I do believe the rotten apple spoils the cart, meaning you may not even realize like you're just not into what's happening, and that effect of the productivity of your teams and your colleagues, the energy, if you will, it's palpable, right? So like you're kind of not doing anybody any favors by staying in a position that you're unhappy in.
Oh, I love it. Oh, I love it. Oh, I wish somebody that I knew listened to this a long time ago. Okay, so let me talk to the peeps, because I know that they're going to have questions, and somebody listening is probably going to say, okay, well, if I want to fire myself for the first time, what is like the first step? So if you could guide them on their very first step, what would you say that would be? Like if today you were going to take a look at where you're at and look and reassess, hire or fire or rehire yourself, what would that first step be?
Well, the first step would be is for your role that you're in, right? And I'll use myself as an example. It's okay, I'm the CEO. These are the functions that I'm responsible for. This is what I need to, or this role needs to do to carry this company forward. So I'm the, head of people, or I lead people operations. This is where, so you literally take out, it's like a JD. Say these are the responsibilities. What are the success metrics for these? Okay. Then you kind of, you fire yourself, right? And you say, hey, if I were to who I would rehire, what are the skills and competencies am I looking for? The skills, competencies, experience, characteristics that this person needs to fulfill to hit, meet, beat, exceed these targets, to fulfill these responsibilities, whether it may be growing the team, hitting XYZ metrics. And so you're literally looking at this as if you are the, hiring manager for this position. Does that make sense?
Cool. Yes, I love it. Oh, I'm going to do this to myself today. Oh, Wendy. I'm like, man, this is like a great journal exercise. Like, what does the company need right now? And so I think that's step one. What does this function, what does this role need right now? Step two, let me write that job description down. Step three, am I the right hire?
Yeah. What's really necessary to make this role successful? Who would be the best person in this role and knock it out of the park? Right? Because we all do that as hiring managers, or if you've been in that position or been on the other end of it, is people are looking for characteristics, they're looking for experience, they're looking for ingenuity, natural curiosity. And so, yeah, you're like, oh,
Wendy, I am doing that. That's like that is everyone's homework, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But truly, like, that is an exercise that I have not done, and I'm going to do it, and I will quote you on it forever. Okay, Wendy, you are the creator of this. So, okay, I got to tell you something fun. You want to know a fun fact? Let me verify this before I talk. Okay, yes. Guess what, Wendy? This episode is going to be the final episode of what is known as the Improve It podcast. We're coming up next week with a brand new show title. Still same. You can find us in the exact same places and all the same spaces. Just new name. So this is the last time I'm going to ask this question. We say at Improve It that it is that thing that you are put on this earth to do. It is your purpose. What is Wendy's it?
Oh, wow. I'm going to give you an answer that is coming straight from my heart, and probably not the one that anybody would expect, or I should say would be what you would expect. It's to raise 3 good humans.
Oh, how old were they?
newly turned 19, 16, and 14. And if there's one job I have or why I was put on this earth is to raise them to be incredible contributors to the community. That's it.
Yes. Wendy, I love that answer. Brilliant answer. And they're very lucky to have you as their mom. So,
No, I'm the lucky one for sure.
oh, okay. Well, I know people listening are going to want to find you. Our peeps, our community is strong. So is there anywhere they could find you? Anywhere that they could see you? Any events coming up? Where's the best place to go?
The best place to go is LinkedIn. So you can find me, Wendy Gonzalez at LinkedIn. That's the best place to reach out to me. And then, yes, I do have some speaking engagements coming up. So I'll be at HumanX, the big AI conference in Las Vegas. But LinkedIn's always best.
Awesome. Okay, we'll link it in the show notes. But Wendy, it has been a pleasure to have you here. I respect this conversation. See what I did there? Full circle moment. And that was her intention, everyone. Okay. And I'm just so thrilled that we got to have this talk and get this exercise and give it breath and life to the world. I'm going to do it. I'll report back, but it's been a pleasure. And I'm so excited to have you as the final episode of the Improve It podcast.
Thank you, Erin. Ton of fun.
What an eye-opening conversation. I love chatting with Wendy, and she just showed us that true leadership isn't about holding on to our power. It is about constantly evolving, questioning, and showing up as the best versions of ourselves. If there is one thing to take away from today, it is this: growth comes from letting go. Y'all, sometimes I do these episodes for you, but let me just repeat that one more time because Mama needed to hear that today. Growth comes from letting go. I feel that one real hard. So here's my challenge for you. What if you fired yourself today? I love this exercise. What would you change? What would you do differently? Maybe it's rethinking the way you lead. Maybe it's stepping back to listen more. Or maybe it's simply giving yourself permission to evolve. My friends, that is wrapping up our time for today. But if you loved it, please let's keep this conversation going. Connect with me on Instagram at It's Erin Deal or on LinkedIn. Share your biggest takeaways in your IG stories or on LinkedIn. Tag me. We would love to share and hear what you're thinking, what you took away from today. And also, for the very last time, I'm going to tell you to keep failing, keep improving, because this world needs that very special it that only you can bring. I'll see you next week. And guess what? Just like Wendy, we're evolving. Bye. Improve It podcast.